Alrighty. Welcome. I believe that we are live on LinkedIn, and I'm so excited to be here today with two Purdue alums, as it were. Go Boilermakers, as I Googled this morning. I'm Julia. I am the head of sales at Hook and Heika. And we've got Zach Eikenberry, our CEO, and we have Aurobindo Sundaram, the CISO at Relics. So thank you guys both for being here. If anybody watching doesn't know Aurobindo or follow him on LinkedIn, you definitely should. I don't know how long I followed you. I think it's from back my time at Know Before. But so, anyways, you've been in my feed for a while, and he posts great content on cybersecurity in general on the whole, but tons of other fascinating things. You'll love his photography. My favorite post that I think I remember seeing was a shot of the Chicago theater. And I'm from the Chicago
Mhm.
suburbs. I studied theater. So like that one just always stuck out to me. But there are tons of great things that have come across my LinkedIn feed. And so if anybody catching this isn't a follower, they should be. I'm going to give a really brief introduction, and then also we're going to jump into some really fun conversation on cybersecurity and where it is today. So at Relics, he articulates and implements their global cybersecurity strategy. And if you don't know Relics, that's not completely uncommon, but they work with lawyers and insurance agents, law enforcement, and scientists to use their services every day to improve society. And Aurobindo has been in cybersecurity for over 30 years. He's much happier talking about tennis, dog fostering, travel, and photography. So I'm excited for us to dig in today. Being that you've been in the industry now for 30 years, Zach and I are in the security awareness space, of course. The security awareness uh, industry has gone through a few evolutions, and we'd love to talk through some hot takes on traditional security awareness training to security culture, now human risk management. What are your thoughts? Are we just putting lipstick on a pig? Like what's actually changing? What is going on in the industry?
So, honestly, I think the biggest thing that changed in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, is the presence of telemetry. Meaning, you've got information about what users are doing, right? So even 5, 10 years ago, when we used Exchange online on site, we really didn't have logs that we could say, hey, what did this user do? What did they click on? What did they view? All of that other good stuff. And so
Mhm.
since everyone's gone off to the cloud and you have all this information about what users are doing, there's a treasure trove of technology information that can now aid the sort of former security awareness and training people
Hmm.
in merging them together along with good process to really improve the user experience as well as secure it better. And I think that's what the biggest change is. We've got all this data, and now we don't quite know what to do with it, where we think it can be useful. And so as an industry, we're sort of still feeling around a little bit in the dark of, wow, we used to just ship people to training and call it a day. Now we've got all this data, and we can use this data to create scores, but we're not quite sure what these scores mean. So let's just make up a hypothesis and run with it. And that's, I think that's okay, because I think it's sort of in the infancy and experimentation stage. But at some point, to actually get better in this whole realm, I think we need to get more formal about scientific analysis and actually making numbers make sense. Today, I think we're wandering a little bit, throwing numbers out at things and saying, "Oops, this is bad, this is good, this is risky, this is not."
Mm.
Well, especially because I think if I'm understanding what you're saying, 5, 10 years ago, when all you had to operate on, like you didn't have all of this insight on how users were actually behaving, you had to have that simulated phishing testing there to give you any kind of idea of who's susceptible. And that's not necessarily the case anymore, right? Because you have these other data points where you know who is most susceptible.
Well, yeah. What is your hypothesis then? If you said we're at a stage where the data now has us testing a number of hypotheses, what's your personal hypothesis? What's your belief?
uh, Boy, okay. So I think I'm not sure because I don't know we've got a whole bunch of data, right? So we do have phishing simulations, and I happen to think, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later, because it's one of those lightning rods. I happen to think that phishing simulations can play a decent role in this whole ecosystem if you use it right. Um, I think especially to catch outliers, right? So if I staying on the phishing simulations piece for a moment, um, I personally don't care if a couple percent of my population flunks a phishing test because I've flunked it, right? On a bad day, I'm going to flunk it because I'm like, oh, I think I was going to get a ticket for X, and I flunk it. I don't think I care so much about that. I think I care more about the outliers, the people who like consistently flunk it, and then people who don't know what to do because we're sending them legitimate emails that look just like phishing emails and telling them ignore all the warning signs you see. Go ahead and click this. So I think I care about outliers more, and I care about sort of patterns of um, I'll say susceptibility for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
Patterns of susceptibility and clickingness, right? So I want people to report stuff that they feel is suspicious, and I don't care within reason. I don't care if a few percentage of people flunk. I care about the people who keep flunking because that means we're probably not doing something right as security practitioners to get to them, and maybe they need a little bit of education as well. That whole piece of let's beat up on people who click 3 times, I think it's sort of a wasted effort.
Yep. Oh, can I ask a follow up? Sorry, Julia.
No,
Go for it.
I'm very curious. So, all right, let's say we're living in a world of all this data, and we want to create some sort of score, some sort of uh, aggregated metric that allows us to get feedback from the data. It's too noisy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're suggesting that we need to calibrate phishing sim data to a lower portion of the algorithm, right? But what do you think is the main juice of an algorithm moving forward that determines risk, like a score that helps us understand the data? Where's that meat coming from if it's not phishing sims?
Yeah. And that's where we're all stumbling, right? So we have a whole bunch of data about, for instance, files that you're accessing, emails that you're receiving, emails that you're sending, actions you perform within the email client. There's all of this stuff, and I think you've got to somehow, and I'm not sure how you do it, but you need to tease out some of the more risky elements, noting that some of them are going to be false positives, right? So if there's a bunch of file accesses, for example, and or if there's a bunch of attempted accesses to inappropriate websites, or if there is sort of a person that's kind of going around the network or on OneDrive searching for different things. Those are all risk indicators, but they're not definitely not true positives, right? So you sort of say, oh, this might be an elevated risk, and maybe you should take a look at that. So I'm not sure what the formula is, and I think lots of smart people, I think including you guys, are trying to figure out what is a formula that fits this data that we can say gives you a decent number of true positives while reducing the false negatives and the false positives.
Yeah. I think the other thing I'm kind of curious to go back to is in thinking about those users who might have a few repeat offense issues,
Sure.
right? Like,
Yeah.
so, but we don't want to beat them up. So in your career, as you've seen things progress, like I would bet that maybe you've seen people have strong emotional reactions from time to time about, hey, we need you to take this remedial training, or, people who have had probably really positive experiences with training. And then also some people who feel like this is really getting in my way of just doing my job. How have you, I feel like we talk a lot about the marketing of a security awareness program, but there's also the selling on an individual basis. Have you had any moments where you've kind of converted somebody to your side, and have you had experiences where you were able to really get through the noise and help somebody understand the gravity of why we do all of this? It's not just the legal and compliance, but it is also for them personally. Have you had any experiences like that where you had somebody who was really kind of had their back up and they came around, or have you just always been able to stay ahead of it, maybe with good tactics?
No, it's such a fascinating question because I remember exactly. I've had exactly this experience, and unfortunately, it took something bad happening to them.
Mm.
But then they turned around a whole bunch. So let me tell you the story.
Yeah.
And this was the person who I've had interactions with, and they just didn't care that much about security, right? And they're like, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? Uh, and it's no big deal. I won't fall for it. That sort of thing.
Mm.
And then eventually they, for some reason, they got caught in a scam and ended up wiring like $14,000 to the wrong person. And that sort of slapped them in the face, right? It's like never let a good crisis go to waste sort of thing. And they're like,
Mhm.
holy crap, I thought I was smart. I thought I was pretty solid on this stuff. This is
Mhm.
horrible. And I said, you know what you can do? What you can do is write a first person story that we can push out on our internet for people to read and say, I'm smart. I don't fall for this kind of crap until I did. And so
Yeah.
we kept some of the details anonymous, right? But we had them write the story in their own words, light editing, if even that, by the corporate comms group,
Yeah.
and then pushed it out to all our employees. And the reception was ridiculous. Dozens of people came back and said, "Whoa, this sort of thing has happened to me. It happened to my brother. It happened to my sister. I'll be really careful going forward. And what can I do to help?" And so I think first person stories really help because
Yeah.
especially with like from a peer,
Yeah.
because you're like, I wouldn't I won't fall for that nonsense. And then you're like, whoa. And can I tell you another story, please?
Please.
Because
Yeah.
this just happened to me. We always talk about like literally 20 minutes ago. Um, we always talk about how when someone calls you from a bank or credit union or whatever else, and they're asking you for information, hang up and call the bank back, right?
Mhm.
Because it could be a fish. So
Mhm.
yesterday, someone called me from Capital One, and they're like, "Hey," and they knew my name. I'm your contact at Capital One. I'm so and so. Call me back. Here's my number, extension. And I needed a bank letter. I actually needed something. And I'm like, "Oh, they're calling me back
Ding,
about that."
ding, ding. Yeah.
And right, and I'm like, I was sitting here. This was at 12:40, 10 minutes before we got on the call. I'm like, I want to take care of that before I get on this call. And I'm like, should I just go on to Capital One and look for it? I'm like, wait a minute. He called me, and the caller ID said Capital One.
Mm.
So I called him,
Mhm.
and the phone rang, beep beep beep, and then it went to an Autobot that said, "This is Capital One. Click 1, 2, 3, whatever." And I hit three, which was the the number this guy asked me to hit. I hit three, and then I was like, "Wait a minute! I'm doing exactly the same crap I've told everybody not to do." And so I hung up, got on the Capital One website, called their 800 number, got it all sorted out before I jumped on. But, I'm a smart guy. I never fall for this, but I just about did. And maybe that was the real Capital One guy, but everybody's going to
Yeah.
fall for it.
Right. And I think I saw something recently that you commented on where you were just talking about the need for empathy. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's sometimes what I find missing in some of the conversations that I have. And not that I don't have empathy with the people that I'm talking to too, because they're trying to solve a problem. I do. But there is that reality of just the people who are falling for these things are just like that whole thought process that you went through of like, oh, I want to handle this thing on my to-do list. Can I get this done in the next 10 minutes? Okay, the most efficient way to do that is surely going to be to call, it's just like when you think about it and you think about your thought process there, that I think that's like an amazing story as well, just to tell that and kind of think about that pattern interrupt and how can we incorporate those kinds of things in the training, understanding and having empathy for people's day to day, that like they have a to-do list a million miles long. They have
Mm-hmm.
things from yesterday that they're not done with. They have a meeting coming up and they're busy. They're just trying to move through their day. And yeah, I think those are both really incredible stories. I think that's the good stuff, but it's hard also for folks. Also, those things require you to have some level of personalization in the material you're putting forth. You can't
Yeah.
just rely on a vendor to do that for you. It's not possible for anybody to put out a story that's going to resonate in that same way, but in conjunction with other tools and materials, sure, it can help help everything resonate. But those are really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting to have to argue the point that depending on the context, 100% of people are going to fail for a phishing or a scam at
Yeah.
some point, right?
Yeah.
Like, all I have to do is get the context right, and as someone who simulates bad guys, I realize over the course of the number of years I've been doing it that it has to do with context I can't control. Like if, I used to, back when people were in office, our most potent phishing sim was 4:45 p.m. as people were heading home, and you'd say, "Hey, payroll's getting held up. Please give me your new payroll information so we can get you paid." Right? People would fill those things out on their mobile phone at stoplights all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, you know that's possible right now. I think that our most potent phishing simulations now come around Valentine's Day, which is kind of sad because we're actually in a loneliness epidemic more than we are. So the context of catching people who are lonely is a lot easier than anything else right now. But I guess I'm curious on a slight change of topic, like what do you think is the direction we should search for? Do you have an answer to human risk? And if not, like what field are you searching in when you're trying to search out, like, how do we solve human risk?
Yeah, the answer in cybersecurity is always 82%, because everybody quotes 82% of users do this, 82% of companies do this. So that's the answer. But no, seriously though, I think I'm searching in three areas, right? And it's going to be sound kind of trite when I say this, but it's mostly about cyber resilience and using sort of the people, process, technology triad to reduce your risk to an acceptable amount, right? So we talk about humans are our firewall, or humans are the greatest risk. Neither of those two things interests me one way or the other. It's immaterial. They're
Sure.
just a factor, right? And so, are they going to click on stuff no matter what we do? Yes, they are. So what? And that's where the technology comes in to say, well, what are the things you can prevent? What are the things you can detect quickly? What are the kind of we'll talk about nudges too, I'm sure, as we go through our buzzwords. But what are the ways you can nudge a user to say, hey, dude, or do that? Be careful, right? Those kinds of things. Where can technology enable us? And then finally, both of those are going to fail at some point. What are kind of the as close to fail safes that you put in to where the impact of whatever this thing is reduced, right? So you should not be, and we see the stuff about, whoa, AI deepfakes. This guy was taken on a conference call and he wired $25 million. Where the hell was the process that said you can't just wire $25 million? I want to work for that company. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so within sort of more mature companies, they realize that every wire transfer can't have an approval process, right? Because then you're just slowing down business. And so what do? You'd say, the same way I kind of lock my doors when I leave the house. I don't care so much about $1,000 being wired if I'm a billion-dollar company. I do care about $1 million being wired and onwards. And so that's where you kind of draw the line to put reasonable process controls to where you accept failure in a bunch of different places, but you make sure that the consequences of that failure are not material or significant. So I think those are the three areas I'm looking at. I don't think it's a single bullet. And I know there's people who say, just do this and you'll sort it.
Well, we could open up. I think, of course, the space I'm personally fascinated by is not one part of the human experience, but all parts of it. And usually that means, without getting too philosophical here, that you're dealing with like the psyche of people. So I'm into the psychology of what's going on that we can see evidence for but can't quite explain. Like we have phenomenon.
Sure.
That's where I'm at with my searches and my work. But I guess you've said it a couple times now, so maybe nudging is top of your mind. Like, so there are two things that security is always fighting against, right? It's user privacy and user productivity. And so let's leave the privacy part, because you said there's telemetry and privacy of the employees probably going to zero. So what about their productivity? Like, how do you see nudging or interrupting behavior playing out in the workforce when it comes to security systems, processes, technology, or people interrupting each other when security and risk gets too high? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so you actually hit the nail on the head when you said when the risk is too high, right? So nudges have to be not often, have to be rare, and they should be timely, I think, right? And so one thing we do, and a lot of other companies do, which is not a nudge. It sort of could be a nudge, I guess. But the whole place where you say email it from an external source, external email coming from the internet, whatnot. People
Yep.
start tuning that out after a while, right? If they're in a sales-facing function,
Do you know how quickly they tune it out?
how
According,
a week, a month, a couple of months?
nope. You're about 4 hours before people.
Oh, that's horrible.
Not, the Google email banner. There's a little bit of research. People don't see it after 4 hours in their inbox.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, so when you have a nudge, you want it to be rare and you want it to be real as you possibly can. And so things like I think Microsoft has this little thing that says an email banner that says, "Hey, you don't get email often from so and so." I think that's actually great because if you're getting email from, let's say, I'm getting email from my CEO allegedly, but Google is telling, or Microsoft is telling me, you don't get email often from your boss at gmail.com or whatever it is. Just the fact that it's sitting there on top of my email will make me think for a moment, and pausing, as most of us agree, is if you think for a minute, you'll probably won't get scammed. And so pause to say, ooh, why is that coming? It shouldn't come. I think is a biggie. And so I think that's where the best nudges are. They're not frequent unless you're doing some really risky stuff all the time, and they're targeted, and they give you specific information that you can use to say, wait a minute, this is not right. Can I give another example if you have a moment?
Yeah.
Okay, great, awesome. So we implemented essentially sensitivity labels in our email recently, which is where you can be like, hey, this is personal, this is public, this is really confidential, this shouldn't be forwarded, all of that other stuff. And so we're empowering users to do their own protections, right? But at the same time, we know that users will probably make a mistake at some point, which is they'll be sending out sensitive information but won't classify it appropriately, because classification brings with it automated protections, right? And so when we detect that they're sending confidential information outbound, for example, we put in a little nudge, which is really a tooltip, I guess, that says, hey, you might be sending confidential information outbound. Are you sure this is the right classification? So that hopefully, for the moment, it educates and empowers. But eventually, to protect the company, we'll probably auto change the classification and enforce the protections for them. Right. So that's another example of, if you're just kind of moving along in life, doing all the right things, you'll never get prompted. Life moves on. But when you do something that's a little risky, you want it to come up quickly and say, whoops, be careful, and hopefully help them either make a decision or make it for them and notify them.
Yeah, can I say this is actually
for it.
something I've been fascinated about for a while now, because there's some productivity research out that suggests that minor interruptions are worse than full interruptions. And that's because so there's like this thinking fast, thinking slow, switching cost thing that people had for a while. And they're like, we don't want to take people out of a workflow. If you get into deep state, we don't want to take you out of the workflow. So we just need to nudge you, come alongside in a non-interruptive way, and push you back in, draw your eyeballs to this, what have you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm not seeing any data right now. I actually don't know if there's anybody aggregating data on nudge security work. Not the company, but the
yeah.
um, the thing that productivity researchers are finding is that you actually get people when they're doing call it knowledge work task, they'll actually stop in their mind when they're interrupted, and then they'll come back to it. It's like stopping in the middle of a dream, waking up, getting a glass of water, coming back and starting that dream. And but what happens with full interruption is you actually learn something. So what I mean by full interruption is you go to send something that's sensitive from your email, it not only says, whoops, hey, don't send this sensitive, check the source again, etc. It fully logs you out and gives you notice. It says, you've been logged out, you must log back in before. Now, here's the thing. It's so frustrating to the user, but the amount of retention on that learning experience goes through the roof. And so the question is, in my head, we've not implemented this, right? Is there a marketplace for people who say we need to move past nudging to full interruption in the name of productivity because it actually makes people more productive in the long run than nudging? Willing to take the short-term hits with your user experience in order to unlock productivity in the long run? And that's a question.
Yeah, I don't know, Julia. What do you think? How would you like to be logged out of your email when you don't put a classification on it?
If I hadn't gone through, like if I hadn't already gone through a thorough learning experience where I already had that experience, then I'd be really frustrated. So to me, my brain goes like, what's the severity of this task? So like, if we're talking about this, like how big of a deal is it that you guys have compliance with that activity? Now I could see in other now we're going to run out of time. This is where we need the other topic. This is where, doesn't this branch into like behavioral psychology and whatnot? Because then like, is that not just like that much of a hand slap or touching a hot stove? That
is it a punitive event? And like that's the question.
Event. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, so you just laid this on me, right? So my guttural reaction is, I'm going to be pissed. You know, right? No. If it just happened to me, I'm going to be so pissed off. You think you made me more productive? Watch me take a nap for the next 6 years, right? But on the other hand, right, and on the other hand, if I get a ticket, I'm going to be driving slowly for the next couple of months. Right? But
I thought about that
when I ran a
red light the other day, and I was like, man, I wonder if there's definitely a camera on that light. I wonder if I'm gonna get a ticket. Like, am I gonna get a ticket? And I like was talking to my daughter, and I was like, oh man, mommy just ran that red light, and I like just I just was distracted for a second. I thought I had longer in the yellow, but yeah, if I get a ticket, it definitely is going to change behavior first.
The question is like on the nudge security side,
right?
Like, do you go from partial interruption to full interruption in order to catch people? And actually, the switching cost is not what you think it is. Like if you think that you're fully interrupting people and now they have to get back in the flow, you actually end up increasing productivity over time.
What if it's in a controlled environment? What if that happened like in a training exercise where it's like almost like we talk about simulated environments? Like what if you're like simulating a work day and you're like, you're in training and you have to go through and you get logged out to like keep going.
I think the training piece is going to be crucial because that's actually training should be a safe place for people to capture new information. So you should be able to play without we don't get into gamification, but like that's actually one of my gripes about simulations is there's no way for the employee to actually be playful with it, and because it's treated so seriously, they actually misunderstand the lessons they're supposed to learn, and they actually get different takeaways on how they're supposed to be productive in their inbox because we simulate wrong. But that's a whole nother.
That's a different story.
Yeah.
I would. So it's fascinating, right? I'd love to see some studies that kind of look a little bit more at the long-term effects of the whole interrupt you, throw you out of your client, because I'll believe the data when I see it, of course, but I just don't feel like it's good long-term wise, right? Yeah.
We're in the field. We're just searching under rocks here. That's all we're doing.
No, it's. I mean, I guess here's where you tune it, right? So if you log out a user, it's because they're about to inflict harm on themselves or the company. And so maybe
Mhm.
you tune it where there's different levels of, we'll call it punitive action for lack of a better word, punitive action based on what you're doing. But if you're just about to click on ransomware, then sure, log me out, isolate me, all of that other stuff.
Mhm.
But if I'm just doing something kind of boneheaded, maybe a virtual smack on the head. So there's probably some room for tuning of what you do.
Yeah, yeah. I do think there's messaging around it that
Sure,
can
sure.
invite the user back into it. But there's it's just a question about the you brought up at the beginning
Mm,
telemetry and information, and if we assume that no employee has privacy moving forward, that 100% of what
sure.
they do, both explicit and implied behaviors on technology systems, is fair game for the employer, right?
At least in the
Then
U.S.
in the U.S., sure.
Yeah.
Um, Ironically, it might even be more so in Europe, but we'll get into that. Too. But
It's
that's just
anonymized, at least. I don't know.
no. That's the irony of privacy stuff. They need to audit and get full transparency to make sure you're making things private. The uh, I think we're in this weird space where now we're trying to constantly bounce off of productivity, and that's our only
Mhm.
guardrail because there's no more guardrail of privacy.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
security has to figure out how to optimize the security of an organization, right? De-risk it, as in like likelihood and impact coming together, while allowing the employee to be maximally productive.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard trade-off today. And frankly, I don't see a lot of training providers having that debate. The debate is around optimizing the phishing sim. The debate is around
Hmm.
optimizing the micro learning. The debate is around which incentive or disincentive should we put into our game.
Yeah.
That's what the debate is, and I think we're missing the debate as an industry. So, with that, I'd love to hear your hot takes uh, as we roll off on just the industry at large. Like, if you could wave a magic wand and fix something about the industry, what would you fix?
Whew. Well, we'll get to security awareness here in a second, but there's so much like user access reviews and third-party risk management and all of the hack lore we tell our users about. Don't connect to Wi-Fi, don't log into, don't plug your phone into a charging outlet. All of that stuff. That sure, there's some risk, a tiny insignificant amount of risk, but all I by telling users all the time about either all the shit that can go wrong or how awful they are as users, I think we lose them every which way, and so I'm trying to be as simple as possible in our communications. Just say, look, there's a certain amount of risk that just comes with being human and living, right? And we, speaking for myself as a cybersecurity department or whatever else, we've got a bunch of controls that are going to protect you against a whole stack of things. And so if you mess up, it's not the end of the world. We've got controls that'll protect you. So I think that's the biggest thing I'd like to change about what we do in security awareness and training is that we take every outlier and then we make it into a lesson. And sometimes it's not a lesson, just because in theory someone could, at one point in time, possibly maybe siphon off stuff from your phone. Uh, doesn't mean you should never plug in because people are going to plug in. Same with Wi-Fi. Just about every connection today is HTTPS. Are there evil twin Wi-Fi stuff? Sure, there are, but it's almost certain never to touch you. And so if we take away what people normally do and tell them you shouldn't be doing it, they're going to lose trust in us for the important stuff. So that's
Yeah.
the biggest one. Is
Hmm. The boy who
that?
cried wolf from the
Yeah, yeah,
start.
Totally.
exactly. That's
Too
exactly
much
it.
too much hack lore, and
Yeah,
The
it all
overprotective parent who then has a rebellious teenager, right? Like, because they're just like, yeah, yeah.
that's
No,
it.
yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
that's a good takeaway. That's a good note to end on. And I think it's hard for people who are in the trenches and they're busy and right. Like I get that like an IT director at an SMB has a lot on their plate. And so sometimes it's just easier to say,
don't do it.
Just don't do it. Just don't touch it. That I think that people do fall into that. Don't touch anything,
Yeah.
But I think you're so right. And I think what I took away from that I want to encourage some of my customers with is like being really clear about the technology that is in place. Look, we've got this technology in place and we have controls and processes in place and they're going to protect you to a certain extent. But there are some outlier scenarios. And so that's why if you think you made a mistake or if something is off, if you see something, say something and it's going to be okay. Be the parent that tells their kids that if they are not safe at a party at 10 o'clock at night, that you'll come pick them up, like be that, be that CISO. I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think, Zach? What would you change? I know you're in the industry, so what would you change?
I would fundamentally restructure training and say that it's no longer an InfoSec primary deal, that InfoSec supports the rollout of the training, but the training needs to be aligned with the overall company's business and productivity objectives. And I think you have competing visions of what good training is. One from the C-suite saying like, we're going to create an organization that does best for our clients and optimizes and wins more clients and provides. And then you have security saying, we're going to make sure nothing bad happens. And they're both trying to talk at the same level. I actually don't want training to move to HR. Don't hear me say that, but I would like training to just not be InfoSec bits and bytes thing, but it would be a human psychological thing, that we would agree that what's most important to the organization is the flourishing of our people and have them buy into each step along the way down. And that changing that mindset, I think, goes a long way. And that's why I get triggered by treating people as data points or as firewalls. I get triggered when you talk about people as economic incentives and economic units. And that's just my own insecurities on the triggeredness part. I'm a big boy, I can handle it. But it's because I see a world in which people actually opt into compliance training. I know that's crazy, but if you were to show people that it's in their best interest for their long-term productivity and health at the company, and they're bought into the team, they're going to say, all right, how do I help us make compliant? How does this compliance signal for better sales down the road or for a better trading price or for something out there that if I contribute to this, it'll indirectly help? And we don't have any sort of way in organizations today to let opt-in voluntary compliance training work. And because it's so foreign to the...
It is. Yeah, it is. It is. Well, because of course we're like, well, we need 100% compliance because it's compliance.
Yeah.
But if you make the training good, everyone would take it. Right, because you're going to be audited. Yeah. And it's hard to create. It's hard to create training of any sort that everyone sort of empathizes with and would take it just because it's there.
Or ask for it.
Or ask for it.
Yeah. I think the most compelling thing that we do is say, like, does your family have a password policy? Would you like to learn how to make one?
Yeah.
Did you know our company has a password policy? Would you like to learn what that is? And and show people that it's not two different things. And invite people into that world where they're already going through the 5 stages of grief on everything else, that they're either in denial, anger, bargaining, depression, or acceptance on every other piece of technology, including AI. Why not do that with them and bring them through to a level of acceptance with the needs of the security and the compliance needs of a company? And most people are stuck in anger when they hear compliance.
And that's fair, because we as an industry haven't done right by them, right? Because of the I'm going to spank you when you do something wrong, and because of the don't do all the things you enjoy because it's bad for you.
I think it's philosophically built into the DNA. I think the biggest mistake we had was taking humans and calling them a layer, and then we put them in a diagram and rolled it out. And we all said humans are now a layer, so now humans can be dealt with. Let's just talk about the strategies in which we deal with the humans. And when you said people, processes, technology, right? Like you actually have to pull people out of the technology and out of the processes, which are the other layers, and treat it distinct. You have your 6 layers of security, and then you have people. That's how the framework should go. But right now, we put the humans as the 7th layer and think we're smart. That's me preaching. Sorry for TED Talk. Thank you for
Let's get a little bit more vague. No, fine. No, I think circling back to what you said early on is just the connection of human stories. Like you said, that first person who fell for a scam that really thought they would be the last person. That's a really crappy situation. And the fact that you were able to build empathy out of that and help people see their own and share their own stories, I think that is, it's
Can
really
I share another cool story?
Yeah.
This is something else. One of the guys in our corporate comms department did. He's like an amateur magician as well. And so he reached out to us and he's like, "Hey, I'd like to do like a magic themed fishing series." I'm like, "Sure, go for it." And so he did this first video. He's shy and he won't let us publish it on the net, which I'd love to. But basically, I'll tell you what it was. He's basically he says, "Okay, let me talk to you a little bit about fishing." And he's standing there right in front of you and he's just speaking and he's like, what fishers do is they talk to you about something and he shows, blah, blah, blah. And then, meanwhile, what they're trying to do is distract you while you're doing blah, blah, blah. And then you don't notice it. And you're like, okay, yeah, well, that's fine. And then he says, those tactics work because humans get distracted, which is why you probably didn't realize that I was wearing a tie at the beginning of this video. And he's not wearing a tie anymore. And you're like, no, he's not. And then you scroll back the 60 seconds and you're like, holy shit. And that really is a lesson that goes straight into your soul because you're like, whoa, in 60 seconds, this happened. Yes, that's going to happen on email. So maybe the next time I get an email from my CEO, I'll think about it. And so these sort of memorable lessons that go into your heart to use forever and ever, those are the ones we ought to be striving for. Not you click the link, will smack the hell out of you, and you'll remember it for the next month and resent it for the next year. So I don't know the answer. That video was awesome, but there are others, right? And I think we're all searching for kind of the magic-ish grail to connect with as many people as possible.
What a perfect story to end on. We didn't even plan that. I love it.
No, we didn't. No.
That was great. That was great.
Good.
Aurobindo, this has been so fun. We're gonna wrap up the live session now, but this has just been really, really cool. I've enjoyed it, and I'm excited for us to be able to reshare some of these really great nuggets that you shared along the way. And thank you again for giving us some of your time.
It was awesome. Thank you both for having me. And Zach is now. He was my second favorite Zach, but now he's my first favorite Zach.
There you go. Boiler up. Okay, what did it say? Boiler up, hammer down. Okay,
that's right.
There you go. Awesome. Right. Well, thank you
so much, Julia.
Take care. Bye.